Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. This is Glossyphilosophy. My name is Jansen Bidman and today we are doing a book talk. So today's book talk is all about the Renaissance and Botticelli and other significant figures during the Renaissance. So the book that we are covering is Joseph Luzzi's Botticelli's Secret, The Lost Drawings and the Rediscovery of the Renaissance. So let's just get a couple things, kind of like housekeeping things out of the way. When I took an art history class, the professor said Renaissance instead of Renaissance. It's the same thing. It's just how she said it, so that's how I'm going to say it. Something else to note is that even though this kind of has an emphasis, at least the title has an emphasis on Botticelli, the actual book does not. So let me just kind of explain why I chose this. I was so lucky this year and the end of last year to live in a place where the art museum was able to talk to the Uffizi all the way in Italy and bring over some of their amazing collection from the Renaissance. So the Uffizi is this incredible art gallery over in Italy, and they have so many masterpieces, and the idea that they were able to ship them over all the way to the Midwest is just bananas. And so of course I had to go. So I went once with my family and then I went once by myself, and after that I knew I had to have something, a book about Botticelli, because the emphasis on the Uffizi kind of show, the art show, was also on the Renaissance and on Botticelli. But when I chose this book, I really did think that it was going to be more about Botticelli, but it's really more about the Renaissance, and that's totally fine. However, I just want to give that caveat. If you want to learn more about Botticelli and how he drew and where he's coming from, you probably want to choose a different book and not this one. So this book is awesome and definitely a thumbs up for information about the Renaissance, but not so much a thumbs up about Botticelli. So just kind of getting those things out of the way, now we can go forward. All right, who is Joseph Luzzi? So Joseph Luzzi is a professor who was able during, I think it was his sabbatical, to go over to Italy, into Florence and Rome, and just see where the Renaissance took place and to see these masterpieces up close and personal. He even has this amazing story at the end of the book where he goes to the Pope's kind of like headquarters and in Rome, and he's able to convince somebody to let him see the Botticelli's Secret, which is actually the drawings that Botticelli did for Dante's epic poem called The Divine Comedy. And he was able to see those all the way in Rome, and not very many people are able to see the original drawings from Botticelli because it is such a prized masterpiece. And he was able to have 15 minutes, him and a proprietor, just looking at these things, and he said that nobody spoke, and he said they just took in the incredible drawings. And he said that the difference between seeing the originals versus the copies is just like night and day. You miss so much of the nuance from Botticelli, the artist, that you don't get in the replicas made by others. So kind of putting a pin in that for a moment, that story, I have heard this so many times from other people who love art, is that it's such a difference, and I feel the same way, it's such a difference to look at something on a screen, in a book, in anything, any other media format, versus seeing it in person. So I just want to just kind of say, everybody, if you are interested in art, and even if you're not, just go to an art gallery, go to your art museum, just wander around, find something that speaks to you. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if you know about the artist or if you understand what they're trying to say. Just walk around, find one piece of artwork that speaks to you, and stand in front of it for at least 15 minutes. And things will start to become clear to you that were not clear to you by looking at it in a book or any other kind of media. So that's a little bit about the author, and that's a little bit about his experience with Botticelli's Secret. So again, Botticelli's Secret, we all know, or if you are familiar with Botticelli, he painted things like Primavera, the picture of the Magi, the Adoration of the Magi. He also painted some sacred work that unfortunately was lost during World War II or shortly after it got burned in a salt mine. But we know that he created it. It feels like maybe he didn't create as much as like Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci, but we don't know how much has been lost, and we certainly don't know the full scale of what he has done, because so Botticelli was creating most of his masterpieces, most of his artwork in Florence. And during his time in Florence, the Medici family was the family. They were ruling Florence, and they were in power, and they were commissioning all of these things. And when they fell out of power, somebody else swooped in, took all of their stuff, and it just kind of dispersed. And then they lost power, somebody else came in, and it just kind of kept going. So things are still being discovered. Maybe not yesterday, but things have recently been discovered or rediscovered, and it's just good to know about various artists and things that they've done, and then you can kind of make a decision about whether or not you think that they're awesome. So I have also been very fortunate to not only see the work at my local art museum, but I've also been really fortunate to go to Italy, go to the Uffizi, and see Primavera, which is definitely one of my favorite Botticelli works. I've also seen Birth of Venus, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with, and it, like, seeing it in a book and seeing it in person, it does look so different. So kind of just like talking about Botticelli as an artist. In this book, it's really interesting because Joseph Luzzi says, like, you either love him or you hate him. And I really like Botticelli. I think he does a really beautiful job. And the author also says it's really hard to kind of put your finger on why you love him, why you love his art, because he's not necessarily the most technically proficient artist. It's not going to be like earth-shattering. It's not going to be of the moment avant-garde art or any like earth-shattering in any way. And yet it kind of is if you just look at it a little bit longer. And that's what I think he is so magical at. Okay, so for those of you who don't know, the artwork pre-Renaissance was all about sacred images. Those were the things that were being commissioned. So it's like the Madonna, who is also known as the Virgin, or Mary as the Virgin, holding baby Jesus, lots of baby Jesuses, lots of virgins, Virgin Mary, and lots of angels and things like that. So lots of sacred pieces. The Renaissance happens, and then all of a sudden we are starting to see artwork of people beyond the Bible, people beyond sacred stories. And Botticelli is one of the artists who really steps outside of the Bible, and he steps outside of the sacred world. He does have some sacred works, but he definitely steps outside of that. He also takes a lot of the poses pre-Renaissance and puts them into his new stuff. For example, if you Google, Pinterest, whatever, the work Primavera, you will see that in the center is a woman, and you will notice that she has a little bit of a gap around her, and she almost has a little bit of a halo, okay? This picture has nothing to do with anything sacred. It is showing the spring coming to life. It is also showing Paris deciding which goddess he's going to follow, and eventually we know that he goes with Aphrodite to get Helen of Troy, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so very secular work, nothing sacred about it, but there are sacred elements. Okay, so that's really interesting by Botticelli. It's also really interesting, the colors. The colors just explode in the Renaissance. All of a sudden we have these bright, fun colors. Michelangelo uses them in the Sistine Chapel. Botticelli uses them. If you're not a sculptor, you're just using these incredible colors, okay? And then he also does this really interesting thing with the female form and with the hair. I feel like if you know Botticelli, you know the hair. Because Venus, the birth of Venus, her hair is just blowing in this wind that's happening from this wind god that's coming over, and it's just beautiful and kind of wavy. And some people think that the wavy hair is symbolic or symbolizing the Renaissance itself. Even though at the time people weren't using that word, it's kind of yeah, I'm painting something that's secular and I'm gonna blow the hair. It's not going to be stagnant, which is another reason why I like the Botticelli paintings, is because there is movement, and you can almost, in Primavera, you can almost hear the music that the goddesses are dancing to. You can feel that wind that Venus is feeling as she's sort of trying to cover herself up from the wind. And even in the Adoration of the Magi, which is just brilliant communication and marketing on the Medici family, it is so interesting how, even though it's technically a sacred work, that there are so many secular things kind of creeping in. So I think he's a really great artist. I think he definitely pushed the envelope, but he pushed it in a quiet way. Whereas Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci just slammed right into, we're changing the art scene, deal with it, okay? So this book is sort of about Botticelli as an artist, but it's definitely more about what's going on in Florence at the time that he's creating all of these works. It's also about the work that he did on Dante's Divine Comedy. So if you don't know, Dante wrote this literally epic poem about him walking into the woods and going into what happens when you pass on. If you've been good, if you've been bad, all sorts of bad, and everything is kind of covered, and he is taken on this journey by his muse Beatrice, okay? And Dante was Florence's guy. He was super involved in politics. He was super involved in his poetry, but he was just kind of a really important person. Unfortunately, when Dante was alive, Florence was really not happy with each other. So there were lots of different factions going on, and he was on a losing side. So he gets kicked out of Florence, writes the Divine Comedy, and eventually, right before he dies, he's allowed to come back. Okay, so Florence loves Dante and feels like they own him and his stories and all of the things that are Dante. And then Botticelli comes along, and he is also very interested in Dante, and so are the Medicis, who are the ruling family at the time of Botticelli. They commission him, one of the brothers commissions him to create this, like, it must be a ginormous book of drawings to go along with Dante's Divine Comedy. And a lot of artists have tried to tackle illustrating Dante's Divine Comedy. The author says that no other artist has been able to capture the essence, the emotion, the kind of like higher arching ideals of Dante's Divine Comedy like Botticelli. Throughout the book, you can see some of the sketches. Obviously, they are duplicates. The duplicates themselves, they're really small, so it's hard to kind of grasp what it looks like. But as soon as I read that epilogue where Joseph Luzzi talks about actually seeing the real or original works, I thought, yes, this must be incredible because of the soft lines that he uses and just his, like, under the radar pushing everybody into a different way of looking at art and poetry and just the time period itself. So, would I recommend this book? Yes. However, again, if you're interested in learning about Botticelli, like as an artist, how he mixed paints, where he grew up, just like his artistic style, don't start with this book. Start with a different book because this is not really going to help you. If you don't know anything about Dante, if you don't know anything about Florence, if you don't know anything about the Renaissance, don't start with this book. No, no, no. If you do know a little bit and you're interested in the Divine Comedy especially, definitely read this. So now, it's been a long time since I read the Divine Comedy, and I was definitely not in the right headspace. I didn't have enough knowledge to understand it. Now I need to go back and read Dante's Divine Comedy. It's probably going to be on my book list for next year, so just know that that is coming. And I definitely need to learn more about the Medicis because I thought I knew some things, and then I read this, and they are just like the most incredible, crazy ruling family that I've ever read about. So that is probably also coming next year. But this book is chock full of information about Botticelli from like the beginning of where he started in Florence and then his works and how they've traveled throughout time and how they've been received. Sometimes people hate him, sometimes people love him, sometimes people completely forget about him, and just like that journey of how he's stayed kind of in our thoughts. This is also another tipping point book. If you haven't checked out Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point, read that as well, and then read this, and you will completely understand where I'm coming from because you meet all of the characters that create that tipping point for Botticelli in this book. So that's kind of fun. And I do apologize for having two tipping point books, like one right after the other. The next one is not really a tipping point, so there we go. But this book is really interesting, and it definitely gets you kind of rethinking about the Renaissance and gets you excited about going to your art museum. I completely agree with Joseph Luzzi that going to your local art museum and just finding something that inspires you and standing in front of it for a little while is such a good idea. So I really would love to encourage you to find something to go and then find something that you're interested in, even if you don't know about the artist or what they're trying to communicate. Something will grab your attention. So find that something, stand in front of it for 15 minutes, don't talk, just look, and things, I promise you, will start popping out, and you'll start to question and wonder, and then more things will start popping out, and then maybe you'll want to read a book or talk to somebody about it, and it just kind of starts this wonderful, interesting journey for you. So that is my recommendation. Thank you for watching this book talk. I hope you enjoy this. Normally I do fashion videos every Wednesday. I do beauty videos every Friday, and I'm also adding in an extra video on Mondays that are a little bit shorter, just kind of wrapping up some ideas that are flowing through my head. And so I hope you enjoy those as well. Definitely hit the subscribe, hit the thumbs up, and I will see you very soon in the next video. Bye!